Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MyAdvice webinar this month. It's a pleasure to welcome everybody in. It's always wonderful to have our esteemed guests join us and to have you take time out of your busy schedules to join as well. My name is Chad Erickson. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Sales at MyAdvice. And kind of just reflecting recently, I'm like, my gosh, I'm in my 26th year of it being in this medical and dental marketing space. So long time. Not that I've learned it all, but I've seen a lot during that time and continue to make fantastic relationships and develop those in this space and continue to see the evolution that exists within medicine. And it's fun. There's challenging at time, but there's great resources out there and great people. And Brighton Neal, the CEO of Dentist Partner Pros, is one of those. As we get started today, let me just give a little bit of information on kind of our format for those that are joining for the first time. So this webinar slash podcast is being recorded and it will be made available to everyone afterwards. We'll be sending out to all of our registrants. So you're going to get that link automatically. We'll also be posting it to our YouTube channel within probably the next 1 to 2 days as we get a chance to do some quick editing on it and add a little intro and outro and get that done. So it will be made public here very, very quickly. But as we get started, and lastly, if you do have questions, we welcome those. I ask that you just hold those until the end, and then we'll open up some time at the end for a couple questions as well. But let me give you a little intro to Brighton Neal. Brighton is the co-founder and CEO of Dentist Partner Pros, the industry-leading associate doctor and hygienist recruiting firm. Since forming Dentist Partner Pros 3 years ago, with dental consulting veteran Bob Spill, Brighton has been featured on some of your favorite dental podcasts discussing building high-performing teams and partnerships, as well as strategies for ending the industry's 75% associate hiring failure rate, which blows me away, Brighton. We're going to talk about that. But as I heard that number initially from Bob, I thought, man, no wonder everybody is so gun shy on this and thinking I've been burned once, would do it again. But a little bit more, Dentist Partner Pros have an innovative hiring and onboarding systems that are changing the way that the dental practices hire, onboard, lead, and build their dream teams. Brighton is passionate about helping dentists build more successful and less stressful private practices. Over the past 7 years, Brighton has been instrumental in building 2 startups into thriving 7-figure businesses. His mission is now focused on transforming the dental industry's approach to hiring, onboarding, leadership, and team development. So Brighton, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Chad. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Same. So we'll go ahead and get started, kind of hitting the topic that we've outlined for everyone today. So kind of starting with the elephant in these dental practices, if you will. So I would love for our group to understand from your vantage point, you've been doing this a long time, what are the root causes, kind of these common root causes of the dental divorce cycle? That 75% number is high. So why are so many private practices stuck in that frustration of turning over people in that divorce cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we've talked to a lot of dental industry veterans, and if you talk to some that have been around for a long time, they're not surprised at all to hear that there's a 75% failure rate when it comes to associateships. In fact, some of them will say it's like 90% or 100% of them fail. And I think there are a multitude of different reasons that lead to these different failures, or AKA dental divorces, right? And we call it that because when you're when you're bringing on an associate, it's like as close to forming a marriage outside of like actually getting married. It's just such a unique business relationship, especially in like a smaller practice, 1, 2, maybe even 3 doctors. They work so closely together. So as a result of working so closely together, sharing team and patients and staff and supplies and equipment and all these things, I think it leads to, a lot of common just like personality differences. But I think one of the biggest root causes that we have seen, and this will probably be a little bit of a hot take, but one of the biggest root causes we've seen is that lead to associateship failures is practice owners hiring before they're actually ready.
Hmm.
Okay. And so what do I mean by actually ready? There's a few things or like steps I think practice owners should really consider before just jumping in and trying to bring on an associate. You've probably seen this. You've talked to a doctor who's maybe experiencing some burnout. Maybe they're a little tired of doing dentistry, and they think, okay, I just need to get another doctor in here. Like if I get another doctor in here, it'll relieve my stress, it'll feel
Sure.
better, right? It'll solve my problems. Unfortunately, oftentimes when they do that to solve that sort of problem, and they're not quite ready, it leads to like very quickly failure, these quick failures. Okay. And so there's two things that we see practice owners need to go through in order to make sure that they're actually like quote unquote ready to bring on an associate. So number one would be making sure they personally are emotionally and mentally, and their teams like emotionally and mentally prepared to bring in another doctor to their practice, because it changes the dynamic more so than any other team member, right? More so than an assistant or an office manager or a hygienist, because these are producers. They carry a lot more influence within the practice. Okay, so are they actually mentally and emotionally prepared to share their team, share their patients, share their equipment? Are they going to be okay with someone doing dentistry a little bit different than they do it, even though that way may be still good, but it might be different, right? So are they mentally prepared and emotionally prepared to actually deal with that? Are they going to feed this new doctor first before they feed themselves? Are they willing to sacrifice and do those things? And if they can kind of go through those check boxes, if you will, and say, okay, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. Then they have to go through the next phase, which is their practice prepared to bring on and get another doctor busy. Does that make sense so far, Chad?
It does. So I'm almost, if I hear you right, and it's almost like that family that thinks, hey, this is so exciting to bring home this new puppy. And this is going to be great, and our family is going to love this puppy. And are we emotionally prepared for the accidents that happen in the home? And someone's got to take the dog for a walk, and someone's got to feed it, and it's going to put hair around the house, or all these other little things that this idea of this, it's be so fun and fluffy and great, and oh, dogs get sick and they have to go to the vet and they have issues. Are we really, do we, have we really thought through all the things, and are we ready personally to really bring on that additional, is that a little bit
Yeah,
of,
I haven't heard that analogy, but I think it hits I like it though, because it's as if you were in a family, like we're here in Utah and Idaho and the winters are long, right? And we're just
right?
like tired of being emotionally depressed a little bit, right? We're
Yes.
missing some joy in our life,
Totally. My
right?
gosh,
And so
yes.
it's like, let's go to the puppy barn. Let's go
Uh-huh.
look at some puppies. And next thing you know, we're welcoming home a puppy, but we hadn't actually considered like who's
Right.
going to walk them, who's going to take care of them, who's going to clean up the messes. I like
Yeah.
that.
And yeah, we don't, and a lot of people end up taking their dog back or reselling it. Yes. And so, yeah. Okay. I think I get it. So that's good. So so the second part, was that the practice
Yeah.
piece?
Yeah. So the second part is, let's just be honest, it's the numbers part of it. We like to say, like, do you have a practice within a practice? So there's four main key components that we look at here, and they are busyness, patient load, your finances, busyness, patient load, finances, and your capacity. Okay. And so, like, busyness is how busy are you actually? Like, are you sprinting from patient to patient each day? Are you pushing out your schedule 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months? Are you like trying to squeeze in emergencies because you're too booked out? Uh, that's what we mean by busyness. Okay. And then patient load is similar to that, but slightly different. Is there enough actual patients to go around,
Hmm.
like to feed you and to feed an associate? And so you're looking at total active patients, and then you're also looking at total new patients. Like how many new patients are we getting in the door? Uh,
Is that load question kind of that volume? I think about it in volume. Is that is it what's currently there, or is it also an evaluation of if we were to increase marketing dollars, could we increase more? Is it a little bit of both?
it's a little bit of both. Yeah, it depends. Every practice and their circumstances are unique. Because if you're growing and your practice is just getting busier and busier, you're looking at what's the untapped potential here of us not having another doctor, right? If
Yeah.
we had another doctor, could we fill them up? Could we start to fill up their schedule so they had 1-2 columns like very quickly, especially because we are seeing our trends are, which you guys see all the time in the marketing space of like, are we bringing on average 20 to 30 new patients, or are we like
Correct.
having the door beat down at 60 to 90 new patients a month?
Yes.
And if we're bringing on that many, oftentimes you're actually filling them into if you don't have enough capacity, if you don't have another doctor, you're filling them into a leaky bucket. And those patients, even though you may be like investing in that marketing and they're flowing in like crazy, oftentimes because you don't have enough places to put them, they're leaving just as often, right?
Yes, that makes sense.
So yeah, we're looking at those trends. The other common scenario too is if you're a more seasoned doctor and maybe you're starting to consider to slow down, or you
Mm.
want to buy back a day or two of your time, or you're looking to transition the practice over the next few years, that would be a different circumstance where maybe they don't need to have as much patient flow. And if not, then you got to say, okay, how much are you willing to kind of sacrifice? So that would be the other alternative when it comes to patient load.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
So the finances.
So the finances, the biggest one here is really overhead. Can you afford to pay a doctor? Okay. And the simplest way to look at it is before you get paid as the practice owner, what is your overhead percentage? If it's anything over 70%, you're in a scary territory of bringing on another doctor. I'm not saying it's not a hard fast rule, but you would have to have a lot of untapped potential where if we added another doctor, it would highly increase our production and therefore our overhead would shrink and stuff like that. Most cases though, your average GP practice these days is right around 60%, and that's a good number to have as far as can you start to consider to afford to pay another doctor.
Makes sense.
Okay.
And the capacity was the last.
The capacity, yeah, it's super simple. If you have enough space or time, because when you bring on another doctor, you either need to have enough operatories or you need to get really creative with your schedule. And if you're a single doc and you've got two hygienists and you only have 4 ops in your practice, that's going to be very challenging to start to think because most GPs are working out at two ops every day, and they
Hmm.
typically have two hygienists. So all 4 of those are being used every day. And so if you're in that circumstance, that's kind of tricky. Like, where are you going to
Right.
maybe you extend out your hours, maybe you add days. It's not ideal. But if you're that same doctor and you've got 6 to 8 ops, you've got a lot more flexibility of where you could put them and how you could serve those patients and start to get this new doctor busy.
Makes sense. Um, Perfect. So understanding those aspects, Brighton, what is unique about Dentist Partner Pros, and why are you having such great success? Kind of reshaping this hiring game for these private practices. And I say private practices because I think what we've talked about in the past, and you can speak to this more, is that we're looking at this as an alternative now to for someone who's like feeling a pressure of having to go to a DSO, kind of roll up scenario saying, I like the control in this. I want to be more successful. How do I do this? This is, and you talked about this, the various reasons. It could be for this. It could be that they're looking to slow down, looking to sell in the next little while. It's a lot of reasons, but this is certainly one of those. But why is it that really makes your approach different? Why is it working?
Yeah, it's a big question. And so I'll just lead with this. We've mentioned the industry average is that only 1 out of 4 associateships actually work out. right? So only 1 out of 4. That's 25% success rate. And it's it's too bad that that's been the norm for so long. It's just been something that we've come to accept as it's just the way it is, right? I was talking to a doctor the other day who was like, I'm thinking of hiring someone, and I'll just, I think I could just go and try and do this on my own. I'll go through, I'll try to go through two, three, four, and I'll eventually find one. And it's too bad that that's become acceptable, because if we had any other failure rate like that in dentistry, could you imagine, Chad, if 75% of our implants failed?
Crazy.
It would just be, we would have an outcry, right? It would not be
Yeah.
acceptable. But for some reason, we've come to accept it's okay to just churn and burn through associates. It's just kind of the way it is. And we looked at that and said, there's got to be a better way. And so over the last, 10, 15 years, between me and my business partner, we've challenged that and flipped it to well over an 85% success rate. And so that's a
Impressive.
lot better odds than a 1 out of 4, right? Especially when if you're shooting for that 1 out of 4 and you happen to land in that, it's wildly expensive, like wildly expensive when you start to add up all the costs. We've actually tallied it up many times, and we've seen it costs about $200,000 of hard costs and opportunity costs for every failed associateship.
Wow. That's massive.
Massive. It's astronomical, but it's just not something that we're considering when we're looking at bringing on another doctor. So I think that's part of the thing that we're on a mission, is to help people realize one of their biggest costs, sunk costs that they're experiencing in their practice year over year, is this associateship revolving door. Okay.
Yeah. So
Go
would
ahead.
you say then it kind of your secret sauce, and obviously not getting into the weeds, if people are interested, they can certainly contact you later, but would you say that a lot of your success is that you understand these things and you're doing more homework up front to make sure that they are prepared? Is that
Yeah, so
part of
that
this?
yeah, going back when we said one of the root causes of causing failed associateships is making sure that you as a practice owner are actually ready to do it. So that's one of the things, and we'll plug it later. But if you have interest and you want to see if your practice is in that, we have a free associate readiness quiz, and I can send you guys the link and we can send it out. But it runs them through those 4 things. Um, anyways, so if your practice is ready, then the typical model, and you've probably heard these stories, and if you're listening to this and you're a practice owner, I guarantee you've heard these stories where you think, okay, finally, all right, I'll hire an associate, right? So what's the first thing we do when we think we're going to go hire an associate? We put it out into the ether and hope someone's going to show up on our door.
Yeah.
Or we hear about our cousin's nephew's friend who's graduating dental school coming up this upcoming summer, and like we invite him out, go to dinner, vibes are good, so let's try it out, right? It happens all the time where it's just like, it's just a vibe check. We often say that people spend more time planning their vacations than they do planning who they're going to hire.
That's funny.
Right?
I can see that.
It's true though, because they just go to dinner one time and they extend an offer. And so if we're going to be hiring someone that amplifies the way that we do business, like an associate who is another doctor, has huge influence in the practice, why would we just take it off gut feel?
Right.
But that's what we've been doing. So the way that we recommend to do it is to begin with the end in mind and actually picture out who is going to be your ideal match for your unique practice. Because every practice is unique, and the biggest uniqueness is you as an individual practice owner. Okay. Who are you? How do you show up? How do you communicate? And how does that impact who you could potentially work well with? Right. I like to put it this way. I have a younger sister who is in the dating game right now. Okay. So she is like trying to find her guy. And ever since she was a little girl, she grew up watching the Disney movies and all the princes, all the princesses and the princes. And she started to create this list of like her ideal perfect dream husband,
Yes.
right? And so she has this list of like her knight in shining armor. And the funniest thing happens is now that she's dating pretty frequently now, she starts to go on dates and she actually like comes back and almost is checking the boxes like, okay, does he check this box? Does he check that box? Does he not? And that's what I encourage. If you're a practice owner and you're like thinking of hiring an associate, that's what you should do. Write a list of your ideal characteristics and actually start to compare your potential associates against that ideal. Not just like throw an ad up there and pick, choose whoever's the best of the litter. What are the best of the litter still is not good, right? And so you
Yeah,
be able to somehow compare it and measure it. And that's why I say create that ideal, we call it the ideal avatar of a candidate.
which makes sense. Is have that and then okay, so I got a question along that one, and then I want to get into some misconceptions
Yeah.
that are out there. But what are the red flags that if someone's, I mean, they have to determine for themselves what does that end person look like. But what are common red flags that exist that people ignore, that doctors ignore when hiring an associate?
It's a good question. Oftentimes doctors get really caught up in clinical competence. That's what I'll call it, clinical
Okay.
skill, hand skill. And we kind of tunnel vision in on that. And it's important. Don't get me wrong. Like you want to be able to bring in a doctor that is clinically competent and is going to be able to take good care of your patient, someone that you can trust. But oftentimes, what's neglected is all the other personality and values that that person also brings into your practice, uh, because they bring their whole selves, including how they communicate, their work ethic, how they build relationships or the lack thereof, how they view money, what is their belief type system, whether not necessarily religious, but just in life, like
Yes.
what's important to them. And what we see commonly is just we see doctors, practice owners go out and say, I just need someone with a license so they can do dentistry and a pulse, and let's bring them in and hope it works out.
So
Uh,
it's more of a desperation move than it is a thoughtful move, which kind of goes back to what you said earlier, which is, hey, this seems good. I want somebody in here for this whatever reason.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's we call it like panic point hiring,
okay.
where you hit this point of like I can't just keep going as is because the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of changing. So they finally hit that pain of like, okay, I need to change something. So let me just find someone with a license and a pulse and bring them in, and hopefully they do good dentistry and hopefully they kind of match with the team. But oftentimes that list of like characteristics is so clinically just focused when they should also be considering the individual as a whole person. Um, and so one of the things that we look for or is kind of just like a quick litmus test would be, do they fit your culture? So do they fit?
Hmm.
They have a reason to stay for a long time, and will they be able to make the practice money? So a right fit associate does all three. They match your practice culture, they have a reason to stay for a long time. So they fit, they stay, and they last. And they make money. So they fit, they last, and they make money. And you have to have all three of those if you want your associate to actually stay and really be a part of your team for a long time. And too often, they're most practice owners are just focused on like that make money
You
aspect.
bet.
And if you don't have the other two, it's churning and burning. They're coming in and they're leaving just as fast as they got there.
So I love that, Brighton. And I'm a huge culture guy. And when I say culture, I'm not talking about, hey, who's got the free lunches
Yeah, and ping pong tables and
it's yeah,
yeah.
it's still about accountability, but there's a fit, that exists, and that culture part is critical. That both how you set it up, and I think you talked about it. You're setting that person up for success as they come in, and are you mentally prepared? Um, I would imagine a lot of it has to do with that servant leadership. Is this someone who are you committed to this relationship? And part of that is, have you seen in some of these other groups that fail? I suspect that this is part of the case, is that it becomes what they call triangulation, where this new associate has joined and the dentist starts sabotaging it or allows for a hygienist or somebody else to do it, where they start talking bad about this person who's new, maybe doesn't understand the way things work. and allows for gossip to exist that doesn't include that person. So you've got this hygienist talking to the dentist or talking to another person in the office about this other person without going directly to them. Is it poor communication? Is that I would say communication is part of culture, but is am I off in thinking that
No,
that's what happens?
you're so on. So you've probably heard of a book called The Power of Ted. It's about this the principle of like the dreaded drama triangle, and you perfectly described it. We see it all the time, right? So one of the things that we've seen to counteract that, because all workplace environments, they are ripe for gossip. And the number one person I think that influences whether that spreads or it gets nipped in the bud is going to obviously be the primary leader. In this case, most times it's the practice owner. And so, one of the things that we recommend, and we actually do with our clients, if they do our onboarding stuff, is we do a training day one or even 2 weeks before the new associate starts. And we set very clear expectations of how gossip will be handled, proactively solved, and how we're going to talk with each other to solve these problems. The other part, too, to then continue to maintain consistency after the honeymoon phase for 2 to 3 months, is we will actually survey the team to make sure that they are having a place to provide anonymous feedback if it's not already being addressed. And we've seen, like, if you want an associate to want to leave your practice very quickly, start to mess with their schedule and start to distrust what they're doing in the chair. Because if you start to do those things, they will feel so unwelcomed and distrust,
Yeah,
and they will be leaving very, very quickly. But unfortunately, that happens all the time because they are they are different than the practice owner. But just because they're different doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're different. So how do we as a team start to actually embrace those differences? The other thing too, sorry to kind of do a
no, this is
fallback,
great.
is too often when we go to hire someone, it's kind of like they it's kind of like you've been I had a sister-in-law do this, but she was dating this guy no one really knew. She showed up one day and just said, "Hey, we're getting married." And no one had met him, and it was just like this kind of like blindside. Too often that's happening in practices all over the country, right? That practice owner hit a panic point, they went and made an offer, and next thing you know, you show up on Monday and here's the associate doctor, here's the practice manager, and they're meeting for like the first time. Okay. And the team wasn't involved. And it's just like this weird thing. So instead of doing that, we recommend involve the team from day one. Figure out what's going to be important to them when bringing on this new doctor. What type of characteristics would they like to see in the knight in shining armor kind of person? And involve them. And then when it going through like the vetting process, include them in the vetting, whether that's like the on-site recruiting visit and have them meet the associate before you extend an offer. Because if you can get their buy-in from day one, they're going to be so much more likely to fight for that person's success once they start to show up
Totally.
in practice. So some of it is not just like brush fire management, but it's just proactively setting the stage so we don't even have the fires start to happen.
And here we are, we're talking about culture again, right? If you have a good culture within your office that starts with good communication, people feel empowered, they feel like they're part of this process. What you're doing is setting everybody up for success because now they feel like they bought into this associate who's joining. They were part of the process
Exactly.
of saying these are the things that are important to us. They potentially have a chance to vet out who some of these associates might be, or hey, we've checked out these boxes of we've knocked out. We think 90% of it is a fit. We think there's a little bit that isn't, but we think it's not red flag type stuff. Is everybody okay with this before we move forward? If not, forever hold your peace type conversation. We're going to have this, we're going to consummate this marriage. Is everybody on board? But I think you're right. It's culture, communication. I can see why it's there. So this leads me into maybe we've already covered it, but what are some other common misconceptions that exist when it comes to bringing on an associate? Why people maybe don't do it? why do people avoid it, of things they've heard of it? But is it just because of this failure, or are there other misconceptions that exist out there, where if they're like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
guess if it's done right, it could work, but they're just locked into this. That's too big of a headache for me. I'm not going to touch that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if all of your friends and colleagues and most people you know have experienced horrible, failed dental divorces, why would you want to do that? Like, if
Totally.
I don't blame the because it's a very true reality that has existed for a long time. Um, but going back to what I said earlier, associates are amplifiers more so than any other employee or any other team member in the practice. And if you bring on the wrong fit, they only amplify the wrong things.
Mm.
Okay. They're going to make what you were hoping your life easier. They're going to make it harder. They're going to create more drama. You thought you were going to finally going to get some sleep and less burnout. It's not going to happen if you bring on the wrong person. Right. And so if I were a practice owner and I was looking at the consistencies across the industry, I would be having some of the same hesitations if they were. But I would counter that with, if you hire the right fit, someone who fits your culture, stays and makes money, they amplify the right things. You can get back to maybe pursuing some of your hobbies because you can take vacation maybe for the first time in 10 years. You can, because you have someone that you like actually trust back in the practice. And so some of the other misconceptions I would say that are out there are, and you've probably heard this one, young dentists don't want to work. Have you heard that one?
I have, yes.
I have
Oh,
heard that one.
this is the
Well,
lazy generation, whatever.
yes.
Yes, what
And I would counter with, yeah, there are lazy people out there, and there are
right.
certain people that don't want to work, and it's your fault for hiring them,
I agree.
right? And so instead of hiring the lazy person and expecting them to work harder, why not hire the hard worker and expect them to continue to work hard? Right. And so that I think
Agreed.
some of those misconceptions are practice owners continuing to make the same mistakes in hiring that they've been making for a very long time. And instead of learning from them, they're blaming the hires.
It's great. I was in fact, let me see if I can share this quote. I was find this real quick because it has to do exactly with exactly what you just mentioned. And in fact, I was giving a presentation earlier this week to a group of students at the high school and talking about this. And generation's different, but what I'm finding is that many of them are great. They need they're often distracted, but so are adults. Aren't we all at times? But with the right expectations for accountability and how we do things, things can go great. But there's a quote I read this week. It's from Tony Robbins. He said, most people's lives are a direct reflection of the expectations of their peer group. So when you set the proper expectations from day one, and you talked about that's part of your onboarding process, is we're going to have expectations from every member of the employee, for the associate, from the doctor. When you knock out these things as far as expectations, people will rise to that when they know that this is what's expected, and then accountability is then consistent. What I've seen in a lot of the practices I've worked with is inconsistency. Meaning the practice is like, oh, here's the doctor practice owner with the flavor of the week, flavor of the month. They just went to some conference and now I guess this is the hot button. And there's no consistency to it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I remember when we unrolled OKRs to the organization, I think people were like, okay, this is our new way of doing goals and metrics. Well, guess what? We're 6 years into it now and we're still with it. So nobody questions it anymore because we are so
Yeah.
consistent on holding people accountable to that level of management and of themselves and their teams and the company. And so, again, it has to be part of the culture. Here we are back to culture pieces. So it's great.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
love that. Like so if I could just riff with you on that for
please,
that,
yeah,
because it's something I'm personally highly passionate about. So there's two thoughts that I had. One is in Seven Habits, Covey talks about how people feel, I can't remember the exact quote, so someone will have to check me on it, but people want to be held to a higher standard.
Yes.
Because when you do that as a leader, it shows that you believe that they're capable of more, maybe sometimes more than they even personally think they're capable of. Right. And so as practice owners, I think too often we see practice owners think they're dentist first, leader second. And the true practice owners that I come in contact with often that see tons and tons of success, their practices blow up, they live the life that everyone dreams of living. They are typically leaders first, dentists second. So part of being a leader is you got to create a culture of accountability. And the other part, and you kind of talked about this, was Patrick Lencioni talks about in Five Dysfunctions of a Team. The first one is obviously trust. And so when you're onboarding a new employee, a new associate, those first 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 90 days, the whole goal is to establish trust. Okay. How do you
Yep.
establish trust? You make and keep promises. You do what you say you're going to do, and you admit mistakes when you make mistakes because you're going to make them. And that's for everyone. That's the team. That's the practice owner. That's the associate. But the next one is conflict. How do we handle conflict? Do we debate ideas, or do we cause problems, or cause
Hmm.
gossip or drama mills? And then the third one is accountability. And accountability, true accountability, like you were saying, comes from all of the team. And the best practices out there have a team of accountability, not a dictator up top.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And I try to emulate that. I'm not perfect at it, but I had a situation where something happened internally. I sort of jumped the gun and got after one of our employees, and it was on an email thread with a handful of people, and I there were a lot of circumstances around it, but the reality was I was wrong, and I could have come back and just said, well, you did this because I did, and I did this. And it was like, no, the response just needs to be simply, I am sorry. I was wrong for doing that in that manner, and I will do better and will happen again. And trying to emulate that, I didn't try to justify anything. And I knew there's some other pieces, but it's like, let that other stuff, it will work its way out. But you need to model the accountability first so that
Yeah.
employees understand it's okay to make mistakes. This is a safe place to make mistakes. Just own it, and then we move on. But it starts at the top. Um, and if the leaders are constantly making excuses and justifying things, and well, because of this, because you did this, and getting more victim mentality, or trying to play the blame game, that's not going to work. It's not what accountability looks like. But you'll watch a culture shift as behaviors are modeled properly at the
Yeah,
top.
absolutely. I could not agree more. We've seen that a business, and in this case, a dental practice, is a direct reflection of the primary leader
Absolutely.
100% of the time. I have yet to seen that not to be true. And we've been able to kind of see that because when we work with clients, one of the things we do is we actually interview all their staff. And so it's very clear who they are, what type of leader they are, what's important to them. And it's not our place to judge those because that's not the relationship that we're engaging in. But I've seen it consistently, time and time again, that the business is a direct reflection of you as a leader.
That makes sense. Yeah, I love it. Got a couple more questions for you. So this one's kind of appealing to me, just in my line of work, but I see some importance. But I'm curious your thoughts on this. So, in today's market, we're not just competing for patients, but in what we're talking about, we're competing for potential employees or these associates. So when you think about that and recruiting and retaining top tier talent, um, how does a strong digital marketing presence factor into those decisions for these employees of being able to attract and retain the top talent?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. First of all, you've probably read Start With Why by Simon Sinek, right?
Yes.
So he talks about how people will find you based on your values and like in your whys. Okay. And so there's different ways that you can market yourself as a business, as an individual, as a company, whatever. but the lack of it is I think a huge hindrance in your ability to attract people to you. Um, and so a digital presence, how does that affect recruiting? So if you want top talented A players find A players, right? You've
Yes.
built an amazing company there at MyAdvice. And so you have seen, I'm sure, when we let go of the D and C players,
Yes.
it raises the level and other A players and B players want to work with other A and B players.
I
Okay.
agree.
And so if you want your organization to be that way, how is that being communicated to the marketplace? I'll tell you what's not sufficient is just some randomly written job ad that's on Indeed. That's not sufficient enough. What does your digital presence, what does your website communicate about you? What does your social media communicate about you? What do your reviews communicate about you? All those different things go into a place of how, if I were an associate, would be perceiving what it would be like to be in that type of organization, right? Do you think if, let me ask you this, Chad, and I don't have stats to prove this, but it's an interesting question. If you were a dental associate, same offers, it's 30% production, whatever. There's similar practices. They're both producing like almost 2 million a year. And one of these practices has 500 five-star reviews, and one of them has zero reviews online. Which one are you going to be more likely to go on?
I'm going to the one with all the 5-star reviews. It tells me that they're invested in their practice and that they've created a a buzz around it. The patients are happy. They're talking about it. It's a live place. And it also is going to be a reflection on the office staff as well of a group that's committed to that business because it's not just one person that makes that happen. It's everybody doing their job, everybody lifting where they stand. So that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't have stats or data that proves it, but we have seen time and time again, if you're going to go apply, especially if you're a doctor and you're going to go try to apply for a position, they're going to do research, right? They're going to go to ChatGPT. They're going to go try to look
Yes.
up, what can you tell me about this practice? They're going to potentially jump into the Facebook groups. What's your reputation? What do people know? We have seen some associates walk the other way because of what they heard on some social media, like Facebook group about a doctor. And so all those different things impact your ability to recruit and retain top talent. The other part, though, is that retaining aspect is you can't portray something that's fake.
Right.
Okay. If you're portraying some false illusion that you're awesome and you value culture so much, and then they show up day one and their team doesn't align with what they said is their culture, it's not going to work either.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly. So you can only fake it, but for so long. But if other people are really shouting that out as an ambassador in a way, that's what those reviews become is little
Yeah.
ambassadors. It speaks volumes. So yeah, I'm with you on that, and it does make sense. I had a doctor several years ago that is at this dental conference, and he was we got into a good conversation about his marketing. He was not a client at the time, and I asked him, what he was doing well, and he said, "Well, Chad, I'm the best in my area. I get the best results. I've been around for a long time. All my reps tell me that my results are the best they see, et cetera. And I've got happy patients." I said, "Well, what's your challenge?" He said, I've got more openings on my calendar. I'd like to really fill those." I said, "Great. Well, let's take a look at your marketing." We talked about his marketing, different things, and I pulled up his website, and his website looked atrocious. And
Yeah.
I said, well, Doc, I know what your problem is." He said, "What?" I said, "You just got done telling me you're the best. You get the best results. Everyone says you're how great you are." I'm like, "I've been on your website for 5 seconds or less, and your website just told me that you're mediocre." And I kind of put him on his heels, right?
Yeah.
And I said, and I had to kind of break the silence. I said, "Doc, are you using rusty instruments?" And kind of broke the tension just a little bit. And he could see where I was going. I said, I'm kind of just being a little playful. I said, but I'm being serious as well. I said, "This is perception." And he's like, "Yeah, but these young guys, they've only been around in town for a little while." I said, "And what's your point?" I said, "This is perception. And people's perception is that they are current, that they're modern, that they're up to date, that they have the latest and greatest, that their staff are committed." I'm like, "Yours doesn't give that." And he's like, Wow, you're right. It doesn't. So I was glad he was humble enough to recognize that and want to make a change.
Yeah.
Some aren't, and he was. But it's whether you like it or not, people will make perceptions. We all do. We all make judgments. Immediately, we'll look at somebody. We're going to judge people right or wrong. We all do it. And and so someone's going to do the same thing about your practice. They're going to look at your website. They're going to look at your reviews. They're going to look at your social media, and they're going to make judgments based on that. Now, is that end all be all? No, but if you're all things considered, and everything else looks great, but your website looks really dated, your online presence just doesn't match, where would you go? And I think the answer is, yeah, go with the other group too. It feels like they're going up as opposed to being stagnant. And somebody wants to be with somebody that feels like it's improving. So
Yeah, I
I get it.
agreed. Yeah, I think all those things show a very, one of the biggest concerns we get from associates all the time is, hey, is this practice going to be able to feed me, basically? Like,
Yes.
am I going to be able to be busy enough? And if you have one that's got a super strong online presence, that's a real sign of strength and growth. They're investing in the marketing. Hopefully, they're getting patients as a result, compared to if it's you can't find it, and those are concerns that get brought up. So it's very common. The other part, just to kind of bring it back to the hiring cycle too, is
Sure.
that perception of when if you put yourself in the shoes of a doctor and associate dentist who's going out on job platforms, because still almost all associates are hired, most of them are hired through job platforms. All whatever one you like, there's a
Yes.
whole bunch of them. Okay, they're still almost all going and applying, but they're not just applying to one, right? They're applying to a lot. And your hiring process, how quickly you reach out to them, how prepared, what your interview process is, those are also all signs of how much you value them as a potential, member of your team. And when it's just like winging it and just it took us 3 days to get to someone that applied on a job, they've probably already been contacted and had an interview somewhere else or gone to dinner or visited the practice. And so you've got to just all those things I think are signs of strength that you want to be able to present. And what I've seen is oftentimes busy practices don't have the resources to properly handle that type of problem. It just keeps getting kicked down the road, and they miss out on good talent because of that.
It makes sense. I get it. Hey, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you one kind of last question, then have you give all your contact information for all of our participants, both live here today and those that are watching later. But we've talked about a lot of tactical items, but I want to continue this tactical conversation and have you give kind of some closing remarks here. What are the three most important things that a private practice owner could take today that would turn the tide to help them attract and retain the best associate for their practice? Three things.
Yeah, I love it. So number one is to hold up the mirror and look at yourself as a leader. And that's going to be a cheesy answer, but I think it's genuinely the top thing that impacts longevity and your ability to recruit, all that stuff. So make sure you're developing as a leader. Second is to make sure you have a practice within a practice and you're actually prepared to get someone busy. And then third is to create an intentional recruiting and vetting process that matches your practice culture so that you can find and hire. Those be three. If I were to throw out a fourth as a bonus, it would be to create an intentional onboarding process that includes your entire team. From day one to day 365 or day 90, however long you want that to be, but have it written down, proven, so everybody knows exactly what their role is, when to do it, and how, all that stuff. Uh, so those are four with a,
I love it. I love the little bonus. That's good.
but that's what I would do. And I think if you do those things, you're going to be in a much better shape than almost all other practices looking out there to hire. So
Awesome. Well, Brian, we're going to put your contact information up here and part of our post editing, which would be great. So everybody will be able to see that. But for those watching here live today, if they wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way they could do that to see if there's a fit and evaluate whether or not you're a good fit for them and they should work with you?
Yeah, yeah. First of all, thanks, Chad. It's been a total pleasure. Like super fun conversation. If anybody does want to get a hold of us, you can email me directly at Brighton, Bryton, at dentistpartnerpros.com, dentistpartnerpros.com. You can go to our website, dentistpartnerpros.com, or you can follow us on social media. We've been putting out a lot more content, kind of like this, to help other practice owners just learn tips and tricks on how to build private practices they love to own. So those are all different ways that you can get a hold of us. And it's always at Dentist Partner Pros. So
Awesome. Brighton, I always enjoy our conversations. This has been a fun, as you said, riff today, just back and forth with some really good, tidbits. And I love working with like-minded people. You and your team are making a huge difference in the marketplace. You are a light for a lot of these practices, and so thank you for all you've shared today, and making this whole environment in the dental world better, helping these dentists who are struggling, who are looking for answers, to know that there is somebody out there, that there's a group out there that can help them, and help them manage this, navigate it, and realize, forget the misconceptions, forget that it might be 1 in 4 industry wide. It can be different, but you have to think about it differently. And that's, I hope that's the takeaway today. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our participants here. Again, we are recording this. We'll send it out to everybody. But until our next time, wish you all the best. Take care.